The city of Chula Vista has had to settle some cases around the issue of excessive force in our police department. How do you see your role as an elected city attorney in preventing those kinds of situations and or mitigating those types of incidents?
Mr. Costa.
As a former prosecutor, I know exactly what it's like to work with law enforcement that are on a daily basis in the front lines of keeping our city safe. First and foremost, I take a case-by-case approach on those types of situations. It's always very easy to hindsight and second-guess what our law enforcement are doing out there, but the facts have to be vetted out in each particular situation. And the city attorney has to take a good look at whether or not they need to represent or help the police officer. In fact, the police officers are representing our city and keeping us safe. However, we need to make sure that there is no abuse of force, excessive use of force, and I think the current police chief, David Bejarano, understands that and is implementing that at all levels of his police force. And I vow to work with Mr. Bejarano to make sure that that's happening. You know, we have to enforce the law, but it has to be done correctly. And again, my approach is a case-by-case basis. As a former prosecutor, I know a lot goes on out in the street, and I don't dare to second-guess those actions unless I have the facts in front of me.
Thank you. Mr. Fagan?
Thank you. Part of my role with the Sheriff's Department is to review the policies and procedures of the Sheriff's Department, and probably one of the most important policies that we have is our use of force policy. So to directly answer your question, how would I deal with issues of excessive force? As city attorney, I think there are things that need to be emphasized. Training needs to make sure that the police department has the ability and the guidance, the legal guidance as to what is the appropriate level of force. Additionally, there needs to be a critical review of all incidents, major incidents of force and uses of force. It's important because what you learn from those things, you can then apply to policies and procedures for the police department. Those changes help to drive down liability. And what that ultimately does is keeps money into the city's coffers and doesn't come out of your coffers as taxpayers. The more money that stays within the city, the less money that plaintiffs get and you can use for other things.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cogan?
Thank you. Given Mr. Fagan's experience, I might hire him to help with the review of those policies. That was a very intelligent answer. And another intelligent aspect of it was the risk management function of the city attorney's office in this case. I wouldn't purport to second guess any police chief, certainly not Police Chief Bejarano, in terms of how they engage with people out in the street. They are far and away engaged in the highest risk activity of any municipal employee, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, and more than anything, really need to back them up in that effort. Obviously, if someone's crossing the line and is conducting themselves inappropriately, that needs to be dealt with from the city attorney's office. It's really more of a risk management, standpoint to make sure there's not liability issues, that come back from the city. But in addition to that, since there are so many accusations of excessive force, one thing I think we need to be aware of and be cognizant of, it is definitely a role of the city attorney, is to actually back up the officers. We need to encourage the district attorney's office, in those cases where we think those accusations are inappropriate and there was in fact a resisting arrest problem, to prosecute the Penal Code 148 cases in order to make sure that the officers are backed up out in the field. And we need to protect the officers from pitches motions where the requests for their personnel records are inappropriate. So they need to be responsible. We need to manage the risks from a risk management standpoint, but I think more than anything, we need to back up our officers and defer to the police chief, because that's really more his purview.